Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of On the Beat. I'm Tony Olivero here with my fellow men's basketball beat writer Brett LoGiurato, recapping the Syracuse's road trip. Last two games, victories over Connecticut, and victory Saturday over South Florida after a 4-game losing streak. SU was on the brink of something that Jim Boeheim's never experienced in his 35 years of coaching, a 5-game losing streak. There were the allegations, the unfounded rumors swirling around the internet about point shaving. Scoop Jardine, James Sutherland, Dion Waiters involved, but right when everything seemed to be in a position where SU's season was going to fall apart, they get these 2 wins. They're back on track, number 12 in the nation as of today. So we're just going to do a little 3 things, classic DO style. What are the 3 things that SU takes away from this road trip that they learned, that we learned? And we'll start off with just the defense. Obviously, Kemba Walker 8 points. South Florida scored only 49 points. The first time since early December SU's held anyone to 50 points. Brett, what did you see in that UConn game that you covered with me from this SU defense?
Yeah, I mean, they were obviously, it was no secret. Any team's game plan against Connecticut is to stop Kemba, and Syracuse did it with the most success of anyone this season. And everyone said the key was just staying in front of him, keeping an eye on him at all times. And they made someone else rather than Kemba beat them, and that player was Jeremy Lamb, who tried to beat them, didn't. And they proved that they could stop a dynamic scorer like Kemba Walker, and they've proved it again in stopping South Florida as a whole, and Gilchrist, South Florida's leading scorer, as well. So I think after the lackluster defensive performances of the losing streak, to some teams, as Jim Boeheim said, shot lights out during those performances, but it was good. It's reassuring for SU fans to see that this defense is back on track, stopping guys like Walker.
Reassuring is definitely the way to describe it. But we've seen that earlier in the season. Early in Big East play, they played defense that well. But the one thing definitely that I felt you could take away from these 2 games is something that hasn't happened yet this year, was the fact that your main core 8 guys realized, or 8 to 9 guys realized what their roles were and are comfortable with that, and just going down the line quickly. You got Rick Jackson as the MVP, that's been known all year, but it was further kind of solidified in that South Florida game. Chris Joseph, especially in the South Florida game, became a scrappy, nose for the ball, hungry player who also is obviously going to bring to you your best scoring threat. Scoop Jardine, everybody's been scratching their head at times. It's mind-numbing how he plays out there, but still, he's top 20 in the nation in assists. And these last 2 games, he played better. He played well. Brandon Trish, he's going to be your X-factor go-to scorer. And then you got the freshman and the younger guys. CJ Fair played phenomenal these last 2 games, everywhere with his length, essentially kick-starting the transition offense from around the free throw line, but also scoring. Dion Waiters, everybody thought he was going to get kicked off the team perhaps, and all of a sudden he's a solid 10-point option. And then lastly, I think Boeheim has said it all year, but he really kind of spoke to it, and we saw it this weekend and in this road trip. By Musakita and Fab Melo, all they need is a total of 1 player with those 2 combined who can be a solid Big East big man next to Rick Jackson. I guess UConn was entirely by, and he was arguably the MVP of that game. And then in his homecoming, Fab Melo didn't have the numbers perhaps, but played well, and his conditioning was as best as it's been all year in a highly transition game between these 2 teams. USF was trying to get out in the open. So I think that's the thing we're going to see moving forward. If SU can keep doing that, this is a team that could go deep into the NCAA tournament like we all thought to begin the year. And lastly, the last thing that we're going to touch on, and Brett, I'll throw it to you, Chris Joseph. We mentioned it. Going to the year, everybody thought he was going to be the next, perhaps, Wes Johnson, but he's second fiddle right now, and I think he knows that, and I think he really understood that a little bit, and then we came back from the injury, but South Florida was where I think he really took that to heart. He's still your leading scorer. He's still going to score 15 points a game. What do you expect out of Joseph, and what did you see for the rest of the year, and what did you see from him in this weekend?
Yeah, I think at this point, I think we all realize, I think he realizes, like you said himself, that Rick Jackson is the MVP of this team, and he doesn't really need to take over games, and he's just kind of doing a little bit of everything now. He didn't have a very strong game against Connecticut. They kind of won in spite of him, but against South Florida, he scored, he drove the basket, he grabbed rebounds, he started the transition attack along with CJ Fair, like you said, and he kind of just did a little bit of everything, and that's what a guy like Joseph can provide for you. And I think, like we've mentioned, that he realizes that he doesn't have to be Wes Johnson anymore. Like Boeheim kind of mentioned after the Seton Hall game, but he doesn't have to be that guy, and I think he's realizing that role, and I think this is a good role for him.
Yeah. Two last quick things here. Granted, South Florida is perhaps the second worst team in the Big East, but there was a stretch in that game where it was perhaps one of the most important stretches for this SU team all year, where you saw Joseph right after he had played pretty poorly in the beginning of the first half, and Boeheim kind of got on him. There was 5 consecutive plays where he was everywhere. He was snagging alley-oop passes and starting fast breaks going the other way. He was the beginning of it, and at times it was the end of it. And his demeanor and the energy that he brought was something at a level that hadn't been seen, even if he wasn't the star of the game. And in that Seton Hall game, the low point for this team all year in that losing streak, Brandon Trish mentioned this: we need to come together as a team. And we mentioned it with these 3 things. We think that SU is there together as a team. Afterwards, after the USF game, it was everything was kind of a positive attitude, and everything kind of felt good for the team. So we'll leave it at that. Georgetown's coming up on Wednesday. Be sure to check back in then for all of your coverage. And signing off from 744 Ocean again for Brett. Thanks, guys.